Fame Carved in Blood, The Lost Columbine Transcripts. Chapter 1, The Unzipped Archive. I wish I could tell you I sought the truth for noble reasons. But the night I broke the rusted lock on that forgotten filing cabinet, I felt only hunger. An awful, gnawing need to hear the voices that once echoed through Columbine's tiled hallways. The district warehouse was silent except for my lungs. A single fluorescent bulb shuddered overhead like a dying star, and in its tremor, I saw dusty cassette tapes piled like gravestones. I pressed play on the first one. A hiss, then laughter. Boyish, breathless, rehearsed. The sound of a shotgun pump snapped across decades and slid beneath my ribs. My hands shook, but I let the tape run. "Just wait, you'll all remember our names," one of them bragged. Static swallowed the rest. My pulse drummed louder than their voices, yet I listened as though the tape were oxygen and I'd die without it. I'd studied the official timeline, the televised horror, the grainy cafeteria footage, but nothing prepared me for the intimacy of that chuckle. It was the giggle of someone spray painting a friend's locker, not plotting an apocalypse. And that banality, the way evil wore acne and a plaid overshirt, made the darkness feel contagious. If they could choose fame over empathy, what might I choose once the tape ended? I slid another cassette into the recorder. A basement ambiance, whirring computer fans, soda cans clinking, muffled video game gunfire. One of them read from his journal, voice hushed, almost embarrassed. "I am not a god yet, but on the day of the event, I will be." Pages turned. He spoke of weapon calibers like they were SAT scores, of explosives like prom corsages. Each line dripped with swollen ego and bottomless vacancy. My stomach curdled. The more he fantasized, the more I felt him staring through the magnetic ribbon, sizing me up for worship. I flipped open my notebook. Ink pooled where my pen lingered. Words refused to form. I wasn't an investigator now. I was a voyeur to the void. The boys weren't ghosts begging exorcism. They were marketers pitching carnage, and every replay strengthened their brand. Each boast about body counts slid into my mind like a needle injecting viral fame. I worried, was I amplifying the signal or decoding it? A paper envelope sat beneath the cassettes. Inside lay photocopies of diary pages, swirls of black Sharpie circling phrases like "natural selection" and "ain't my fault kids stay fat and lazy." The margins brimmed with doodles of grenades sprouting angel wings. In the corner, a smiley face dripping blood. I traced the ink with a gloved fingertip, startled by the warmth I imagined beneath cold toner. Headlights swept across the warehouse windows. My breath stalled. For a heartbeat, I pictured the shooters themselves arriving, resurrected by notoriety, ready to finish the reel with me as footnote. But the lights passed. Silence returned, heavier now, as though the building recognized its own complicity, sheltering relics that still radicalized in whispered loops. Back at the recorder, a third tape demanded attention. This one began with a question. "Dude, what if nobody remembers?" A pause, then the other answered, "They will. They always remember the monsters." I felt the sentence strike like a mallet on cathedral bells, reverberating outward through 1999, through every headline that followed, through me. The monsters were right. We did remember. And memory, I realized, was the sweetest currency violence could buy. My ears rang with cafeteria screams only I could hear. I pictured students crouched beneath tables, asking God if the footsteps would pass them by. On the tape, the footsteps marched in reverse, backward through time, returning to bedrooms plastered with movie posters and first-person shooter high scores. Bedrooms not unlike mine once was. The thought left a metallic taste in my mouth. I needed air. Yet when I cracked the warehouse door, night greeted me with the same stale breath as the tapes. In the distance, a siren wailed, no telling if present or memory. I imagined camera crews setting up outside, microphones thirsty. The killers had wanted spectacle. I was giving them an audience of one, but an audience all the same. Back inside, I found a VHS labeled Library, 11:27 a.m. My thumb hesitated on the eject flap. I'd seen this footage broadcast, pixelated, sanitized, but the raw version, the smell of gunpowder almost leaked through the plastic. I slid the cassette into an old player chained to a wheezing CRT. The screen crackled awake. A handheld view of overturned chairs, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The camera operator must have grabbed the camcorder minutes before chaos, hoping to document safety drills, and captured doomsday instead. I watched a blur run between bookshelves, heard a pop, watched the blur fall. The camcorder tumbled, landing sideways. For 10 seconds, the lens stared at a girl's outstretched hand, trembling like a dying moth. Then Boots stepped over her. The tape ended in blue snow. I vomited into a trash bin meant for shredded transcripts. The air smelled of toner and shame. My reflection in the CRT looked ghostly, pixels bleeding along the edges like I too were trapped on tape. I wondered if the boys felt this hollow on the eve of their fame, this dizzy mix of power and nausea. When the sickness passed, resolve filled the empty space. I would catalog every second, transcribe every boast, expose every festering word. But even that noble vow reeked of compromise. To reveal their darkness, I had to spread it. And somewhere in the static, I swore I heard them laugh, grateful. Outside, dawn threatened, pink and innocent. I gathered the tapes, the diaries, the broken pieces of a narrative America keeps retelling. As I locked the door behind me, I felt the weight of a new question. If the world craves monsters, who am I becoming by feeding that craving? I slipped the first cassette into my pocket and pressed it against my heart, its plastic edges sharp through my shirt. The tape was still warm. Chapter 2. Echoes in the Concrete. I drove home with dawn bleeding across the windshield, the cassettes stacked on the passenger seat like kidnapped hearts still thudding inside their plastic coffins. Every red light felt accusatory, as if the city itself demanded to know what I planned to do with the voices I'd stolen. Sleep never came. Instead, I pinned butcher paper sheets to my living room walls and began transcribing. The hiss of the tapes became my metronome. Each keystroke formed a new artery in a growing monster diagramming hate. By noon, the apartment looked like a crime scene, staged by scholars. Ink arrows linking diary excerpts to time-stamped boasts, sticky notes quoting Nietzsche beside crude laughing skulls. The shooter's handwriting haunted me more than their gunshots. Between fantasies of detonation, they scrawled confessions of panic attacks, night terrors, a loneliness so bottomless it collapsed into rage. One line repeated like a prayer. Nobody hears me unless I scream. My fingers trembled when I realized how well the world eventually listened. Buried among photocopies, I found an unfiled psychological evaluation dated 18 months before the massacre. The assessor marked major depressive features, paranoid ideation, and, in smaller script, responds well to creative outlets, writing, video production. That last note felt like a grim joke. The world would soon witness their final film, shot live with real blood effects. I traced the margins where a counselor had scribbled, "Follow-up required." There was no evidence the follow-up occurred. I imagined paperwork sliding off a crowded desk, drifting like snow until buried under fresh crises. America's mental health avalanche, one misplaced sheet at a time. A sudden knock rattled my door. I nearly yanked the power cord from the recorder, convinced some phantom authority had come to confiscate the evidence. Or worse, the perpetrators themselves had materialized to collect royalties. Instead, a thin woman stood in the hall, clutching a takeout coffee. Her badge read, Susan Leary, school counselor, Rhett. She'd seen my research request on an old alumni forum and driven 3 hours, she said, because the past wouldn't let her sleep either. We sat amid paper entrails while the tapes whispered behind us. Susan's eyes never left the spinning reels. "I heard them laugh like that once," she murmured. She described hallway conversations where the boys played humble, hiding grandiose fantasies behind smirks. She'd filed behavioral reports. They vanished into administrative purgatory. Twice she phoned a parent and suggested therapy. Both times she was thanked politely and ignored. At one point she reached for a page I'd taped up, an entry dated 2 weeks before the massacre. "Therapists are pills in human form. I need something stronger." Susan recoiled as if the ink burned. "We were weaker than their sickness," she said, voice shredding. Tears welled, but never fell, as though even grief feared permanence. After she left, dusk seeped through the blinds, turning my wall of evidence into a bruised mosaic. The tapes clicked off. Silence roared. I realized if I stayed inside any longer, the room would warp into another basement shrine, so I grabbed a notepad and drove. The former residents of One Shooter sat in a cul-de-sac now lined with ornamental crabapple trees. A "for rent" sign leaned against the porch rail. My pulse hammered as I rang the landlord's number, posing as an inspector verifying foundation repairs. Money persuades where truth stumbles. Within minutes, I stood in the infamous basement, alone. The air was colder than the house above, as though retaining the temperature of 1999. Someone had painted the cinder block walls a cheery eggshell, but beneath the new coat graffiti, ghosts flared when my flashlight swept across uneven texture. Fragments of slogans, tally marks, a crude bomb sketch. I knelt and ran a finger over one recessed groove, a date carved like a countdown. A battered desk lurked in the corner. Its drawers were empty, but when I pressed my ear to the wood, I swore I heard hard drive spindles, doom soundtracks, whispered roleplay about the mission. I sat in the chair and felt it swivel to a remembered angle, aligning perfectly with an imaginary camera tripod. My reflection in the blank monitor resembled every audience member who studies these killers. Horrified, transfixed, complicit. I escaped when footsteps creaked overhead. Just a tenant touring the upstairs rooms, unaware of the mausoleum below. Outside, the night smelled of cut grass and sprinkler rust, incongruent with the gunpowder phantom clogging my nose. I drove until suburbia dissolved into highway, then parked beneath a sodium lamp and dry-heaved. Back home, insomnia returned wearing a new mask, the screech of dial-up modems from the era when the boys first uploaded their manifestos. I searched modern forums and found threads still worshipping them, users swapping bootleg clips, rating kill counts like high scores, plotting anniversaries for tributes. I scrolled until sunrise painted my screen a hateful glare. Somewhere between pages, a username messaged me directly, "You have the originals. Upload. The world needs reminders." I slammed the laptop shut, heart ricocheting. Their hunger mirrored my own, but stripped of caution. I saw how curiosity metastasizes into fandom, how exposure curdles into idolization. In the bathroom mirror, my eyes looked fevered. I splashed water, but the reflection didn't flinch. I imagined the shooters performing the same ritual years ago, washing sleep from faces destined for infamy. Did they see monsters or martyrs staring back? I returned to the tapes, seeking rebuttal, and instead found recruitment. One boy mused, "We'll unlock the cage for others like us." The line throbbed with prophetic menace. Internet history proved them right. My throat tightened around a scream I wouldn't allow. I pinned another butcher sheet, this one blank except for a single question. How do you tell a story that doesn't become a blueprint? The marker squeaked, echoing the basement creak, the pump action snap, the cafeteria pop. My apartment felt suddenly smaller, walls inching close like a camera zoom. Exhaustion finally dragged me into shallow sleep. I dreamed I roamed the halls of Columbine, but the lockers were glass coffins displaying the shooters' diaries. Students filed past, phones raised, snapping selfies with the relics. The PA system crackled my own voice reading their manifestos. When I tried to stop, the microphone fused to my lips and began playing the tapes backward. I lurched awake at 3:09 a.m., drenched. The recorder had auto-rewound and now clicked through empty loops, plastic reels spinning prayers to nobody. In the jittery silence, I made a decision. Tomorrow I would visit the school itself. Maybe standing where the bullets fell would ground the story in victims rather than villains. Maybe bloodstains trump blueprints. But as I boxed the evidence for transport, a final cassette rolled from the stack, one I hadn't noticed. The label read, "The Last Practice." My breath caught. If the others were rehearsals, this had to be their dress rehearsal, hours perhaps before the attack. I set it aside like a loaded gun, afraid my ears weren't armored enough. I stared at the tape until sunrise leaked through the curtains, turning the cassette's clear shell of viscous amber as though filled with captured dawn. I thought of Susan's unfinished tears, the counselor's lost paperwork, the forum user's gleeful request. The ecosystem of horror thrived on discarded pieces, and I suddenly understood. I wasn't archiving tragedy, I was feeding it. Yet I slipped the cassette into my coat pocket anyway. Curiosity, after all, is just fear wearing a lab coat. Chapter 3. Hallways of Recurrence. I parked outside Columbine High long before the sun rose, engine idling while cicadas stitched the darkness with static. A sleek memorial garden now curled beside the entrance, names etched in polished stone, candles half melted from yesterday's vigil. I touched the first name and felt the granite pulse, as if the dead recognized the contraband throbbing in my coat pocket. The last practice tape, still unplayed. Security was lighter than I expected, just a sleepy custodian who waved when I flashed an expired journalism pass. The school had been remodeled, fresh drywall, bullet-resistant film on every pane, but trauma seeped through seams like radon. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mimicking the tape hiss I knew too well. I drifted down Main Hall, sneakers squeaking across waxed linoleum. Every 20 paces a plaque read, "Remember," as if forgetfulness were the greater threat. Yet I saw how remembrance mutated. Souvenir magnets in the gift shop across town, hashtags blooming every April 19th, fan sites dissecting ballistics like baseball stats. Outside the library, rebuilt on the same footprint, I met Mr. Delgado, the janitor who'd found 2 students hiding beneath an overturned table that day. He'd agreed to speak if I promised no photographs. His right hand tremored around a coffee cup. "Kids think ghosts only haunt graveyards," he whispered, key turning in the lock. "They've never mopped blood into the grout." Inside, rows of new computers hummed, benign, but Delgado's story repainted the room in bullet holes and panic. He described hearing firecrackers, believing they were senior pranks, until the intercom erupted with screams. He still heard those screams in white noise machines, in blown tires, in microwave beeps. "Why dig this up again?" he asked. I patted the tape in my pocket. "Because it's still digging up others." He sighed and left me alone among reference stacks. I set my recorder and slipped the last practice into the deck. Reels spun. A door creaked, followed by shuffling. One voice, Eric's, counted paces. 10 steps from door to first row. Clear line of sight. Dylan responded, cataloging ammo. They weren't excited. They were clinical. What chilled me most was the calm. Each syllable a hardware manual for human ruin. Eric murmured, "If nerves hit, remember the soundtrack." A click. Then music warped into life, an industrial track pounding like hydraulic jaws. Over the rhythm they rehearsed dialogue, shouted commands, laugh lines, last words. At one point, Dylan practiced apologizing to a specific teacher, an apology loaded with contempt. My breath fogged the monitor glass in front of me. I realized my body had mirrored their count, 10 steps from the door, exactly where the first row once sat. The library's new layout suddenly felt flimsy, as though walls could revert to 1999 if the tape played long enough. I fast-forwarded. The boys spoke of fame, how networks would splice their images with fireballs, how websites would immortalize their screen names. Eric predicted, "Someone will write a book with our scripts." Dylan laughed. Maybe a movie, maybe sequels. Tears I didn't know I'd stored leaked down my cheeks, not for them, not even for the victims, but for the grotesque accuracy. We had given them everything they prophesied. I was giving them more. The tape ended with a simple line, "Next recording will be live." Silence followed, magnetic, enormous. I ejected the cassette, hands shaking. Outside the library, daylight speared stained glass windows added after the massacre, scattering rainbows across the hallway. Colorful patches landed on stains I knew only Delgado could see. I found the janitor in the cafeteria stacking chairs. I asked what he'd do if he possessed such tapes. He stared at the floor long enough that I heard my pulse tapping on my eardrums. "Fire," he said at last. "Only fire cleanses." That night I visited survivor forums, searching for someone who might balance Delgado's fury with fragile hope. I messaged Maya Caldwell, then 17, who'd hidden in a science closet during the rampage and later became a trauma psychologist. She answered within minutes. "I'll talk, but only face to face. Survivors' words deserve breath, not bandwidth." We met at a small chapel lit by hundreds of flameless candles, plastic flames flickering like digital grief. Maya spoke calmly about guilt intrusion loops, about kids who still flinch when lockers slam. When I revealed the archive, she didn't gasp. She exhaled as if spotting a predictable tumor on an X-ray. "Every generation finds the tapes," she said. "The question is whether they watch alone or with a guide." She asked if I planned to publish. My mouth opened, but no words formed. Maya reached across the table, resting 2 fingers on the cassette. Her touch was steady, firm. "Pain can inform," she said, "or recruit." Driving home, I replayed her sentence like scripture. I'd entered this project hunting hidden truths, but maybe I'd really craved the thrill of proximity, standing near the furnace without burning. Yet, I felt scorched. At a red light, I opened my window and held the last practice up to the moon. Plastic glittered with embedded metal oxide, millions of ferromagnetic soldiers ready to march at the slightest current. One thumb press against the spool could drag ribbons into the wind, erasing the rehearsal forever. The urge throbbed, but the light turned green, and I lowered the tape, cowardice disguised as scholarship. Back home, I cataloged more artifacts, forum screenshots, crime scene diagrams, Delgado's oral history, Maya's cautions. I pinned them to the wall beneath a heading, "Choices left to modern witnesses." Beneath it, I wrote 3 options: archive, expose, incinerate, and drew tally boxes. All remained unchecked. At dawn, exhaustion pinned me to the couch. Before sleep swallowed me, I imagined the 2 shooters sitting at my kitchen table, passing judgment. Dylan leaned in and whispered, "No matter what you pick, you're one of us now." I woke, gasping. Tally boxes still blank. Chapter 4. Streaming the Abyss. Morning light felt radioactive as it filtered through my blinds, tinting the room the sickly yellow of crime scene tape. I brewed coffee strong enough to dissolve guilt, then faced the tally boxes on the wall: archive, expose, incinerate, still empty, accusatory eyes. I promised myself a choice by sundown. Promises are cheap. I'd learn how cheap before nightfall. The first omen arrived in my inbox. An email with no subject, the body a single streaming link, and the line, "Heard you collect relics. tune in at noon. The sender's address was an alphanumeric jumble ending in .onion, dark web territory. I should have deleted it. Instead, I set an alarm, curiosity wearing a suicide vest. Before the clock could drag me into that rabbit hole, I drove to meet Maya Caldwell at a community center where she hosted a support group for secondary survivors, teachers, paramedics, journalists whose lives orbit trauma like moths around a porch light they can't resist. Folding chairs circled a cheap carpet. A box of tissues perched on every third seat like concession stands for grief. Maya introduced me as a researcher. Eyes scanned me with equal parts suspicion and exhausted empathy. One woman, Paula, a substitute teacher who'd barricaded a classroom with desks, spoke about the sound of metal detectors clicking each morning. "They clang like a clock counting down," she whispered. A retired cop admitted he can't enjoy fireworks. Every July 4th, he lies in a basement with headphones. My recorder stayed pocketed. These stories were not specimens. They were raw nerve. When the session ended, Maya pulled me aside. "Did you listen to the practice tape again?" I shook my head. Even the memory throbbed. She nodded, as if confirming a vital sign. "Exposure therapy works, but only in doses. You're overdosing." I made no choice yet, I confessed. Feels like picking the lesser apocalypse. She placed a hand on my shoulder, then widened the view. Whose apocalypse and whose salvation? Before I could reply, her pager buzzed. A patient in crisis. She left me with those words echoing like locker doors. Back home, noon crept up like a sniper. I clicked the anonymous link. A live stream window opened, grainy, underlit basement, the aesthetic of every manifesto ever posted. A figure in a baseball cap sat before a flag plastered with spray-painted skulls. He addressed 43 viewers. The count ticked upward with each syllable. "Today," he snarled, "we honor the originals." He lifted what looked like a homemade pipe bomb, wires sprouting like burnt hair. My blood chilled. This wasn't cosplay. He cited page numbers from the shooter's journals, quoting lines about natural selection. My lines transcribed and shared on niche forums, now weaponized in real time. He then held up a USB drive. Full tapes drop after the fireworks. In the chat, emojis of flames, skulls, American flags flooded. Someone wrote, "My school next." I killed the stream, stomach roiling. So much for choosing by sundown. The decision was stampeding toward me, hooves made of downloaded MP3 files. By archiving, I'd already exposed. By exposing, I'd fueled. By incinerating now, I'd only erase evidence law enforcement might need. As if summoned, my phone rang. The caller ID read unknown. A taut voice introduced herself as Special Agent Klein, Domestic Terrorism Unit. "We intercepted a dark web broadcast referencing unpublished Columbine materials traced to your IP. Are you safe?" I glanced at my window, curtains drawn, but paranoia painted crosshairs on the glass. I assured her of my safety. She requested the archive for forensic review. I hesitated. Handing tapes to the government felt like relocating a venomous snake to a zoo run by children. But letting them slip to wannabe killers guaranteed carnage. "Can we meet?" I asked. "I'm already outside," she said. I peered through the peephole. A woman in a black blazer stood by the stairwell, phone to ear, eyes scanning corridors. I unlatched 3 deadbolts and opened the door. Agent Klein stepped inside, eyes sweeping my paper-plastered walls with the grim efficiency of someone cataloging hazards. She wore fatigue beneath her professionalism. Trauma tourism ages everyone. She produced a flash drive. "Secure courier," she said. "We clone. You keep originals. Clone or confiscate, either way the virus replicated." But refusal risked obstruction charges and left me alone with radioactive history. I agreed. While the tapes copied to her encrypted drive, she rifled through diary photocopies. "They scripted everything," she murmured, "down to walkie-talkie frequencies." I told her about the live stream bomber. Klein's jaw tightened. Copycat cells coordinate online. They trade source material like baseball cards. Deplatform 1, 2 more spawn. The transfer meter inched forward. The air grew claustrophobic. At 86%, a thunderous thud rocked the building. Explosion? No. The fire alarm. Red strobes ignited. In the hallway, smoke billowed. Klein drew her sidearm, nodded toward the tapes, grabbed them, and we dashed downstairs. Residents flooded fire exits, coughing. Outside, sirens wailed. Black smoke spewed from the laundry room window. Accidental dryer fire, or arson, meant as diversion. My mind rewound to the bomber's promise of fireworks, but this seemed random. Or message. "We can reach you anywhere." Klein ushered me across the street. "You're compromised," she said. "We can relocate you to protective custody until we neutralize the network." I glanced at the shoebox holding the sacred poison. "If I disappear, the story festers," she countered. "If you stay, you might fertilize it." Before I could reply, firefighters declared an all clear. False alarm, lint ignited, no foul play. Still, adrenaline had tattooed new tremors into my bones. Klein handed back the tapes. "Your choice," she repeated, then vanished into siren shadows. That night I drove the archive to an abandoned foundry outside town. Red brick hulks, rusted kilns yawning like mouths eager for sacrifice. I lugged the box onto cracked concrete, moonlight glimmering on shards of broken windows. Inside the furnace pit lay charred wood from teenage bonfires. I doused the tapes in lighter fluid. My thumb flicked the wheel of a cheap lighter. Sparks danced, died, wind taunted. Second flick birthed flame. I lowered it toward plastic soaked in accelerant and paused. Incinerate, and future scholars lose context. Preserve, and zealots gain scripture. The lighter hissed, waiting. A distant echo drifted through shattered panes. Laughter. Maybe vagrants. Maybe my own memory spooling. Maybe spectral applause from the shooters. My hand trembled. Flame guttered. Then a phone chime. A notification despite 0 bars. Screen glowed with a single message from the anonymous address. TikTok. Attached image. My apartment wall. Tally boxes visible. Door ajar. I dropped the lighter. It clattered out. Flame snuffed. I wasn't alone on this chessboard. I was a pawn between pyromaniacs and archivists, both calling themselves historians. I gathered the soggy tapes, chemical stink clinging to my clothes. Choice delayed yet again, but urgency metastasized. Someone had breached my sanctuary. The clock counting down was no longer theoretical. Driving back, I rehearsed options. Offer materials exclusively to survivor groups under NDA. Partner with a museum that contextualizes violence. But would any frame tame the content or simply spotlight it? I parked 2 blocks from home, heart ricocheting. The quiet street looked innocent, but every shadow felt pregnant with watchers. Inside my apartment, the tally boxes stared, empty, mocking. Yet something new glared beneath them. A crimson X spray-painted across my collage, dripping like fresh blood. The intruder's calling card. The wall's text beneath the X remained readable. No physical files stolen, but the violation rattled my spine. That's when I noticed the missing item, the last practice tape, plucked clean from its spot. Rage flared, overshadowing fear. The worst tape was now in unknown hands. Any moral high ground I'd imagined lay cratered. I scrawled a 4th option under the tally boxes, hunt, and checked it 3 times. Chapter 5. Predator Signal. Night left a bruise on the sky as I sat in my darkened apartment, watching the crimson X bleed down my wall. Somewhere, the missing cassette, The shooter's final rehearsal, spun in another machine, spooling contagion into willing ears. I pictured copycats ripping the audio, setting it to montage edits, monetizing carnage one pre-roll ad at a time. The word hunt glared beneath the tally boxes, each checkmark gouged deep with frantic ink. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling over keys. If the thief had hacked my cloud backup, they'd left fingerprints. I launched a packet-sniffing utility, tracing the intrusion path backwards through proxy chains that slithered across continents. Most trails dissolved into paid VPNs, but one IP flared, a residential node outside Cheyenne, Wyoming, used briefly at 2:13 a.m. when my firewall hiccuped. I cross-referenced the address with public utility records. Occupant listed as Brent Willow, age 21, former community college dropout turned Twitch streamer known for lo-fi rage rants. His channel banner, a stylized Columbine yearbook photo overlaid with glitch art. My heart free fell. This wasn't coincidence, it was curation. I dialed Agent Klein, voicemail. I left coordinates, fearing they'd vanish into bureaucratic molasses. Decision crystallized. I couldn't wait for warrants. I packed the surviving tapes into a fire-safe backpack, grabbed a handheld recorder, and slipped a crowbar into my trunk. Romanticism smashed by pragmatism. Dawn bled across the highway as I barreled north. Radio off, the engines thrum, and my heartbeat synced like a metronome for dread. Billboards hawked firearm outlets every 20 miles, a serpent of commerce devouring its own tail. I wondered how many visitors carried ghosts of past shootings in their glove boxes. Cheyenne greeted me with winds that smelled of diesel and prairie grass. The address led to a sagging craftsman house, paint peeling in angry curls. A black van idled 2 doors down. FBI stakeout? Drug delivery? I couldn't risk either. I parked around the corner and approached on foot, backpack thumping like a second pulse. Through a cracked blind, I glimpsed monitors bathing a gaunt figure in toxic blue. A youth hunched over keyboards, headphones cocooning his skull. Shelves behind him overflowed with VHS tapes, cables, soldering irons, a shrine to analog decay. My stolen cassette perched atop a mixer, unmistakable. I rapped on the door. Silence. Second rap. Floorboards creaked inside. The door opened a fist's width, chained. Wide, twitching eyes peered out. "You're Brent," I said. "I'm here for what you took." His pupils dilated. "You're the archivist." Voice fragile yet infused with manic awe. "You broke into my apartment." He shrugged, chain rattling. "History belongs to everyone. History doesn't leak bombs into classrooms." Brent smirked. "Neither did I, yet." Chain slid free. "Come in, see the future." Inside, bass from subwoofers vibrated floors. An industrial track identical to the killer's playlist looped. He gestured to his command center, 3 curved monitors showing chat rooms scrolling code-like. Usernames spewed gore emojis, begging drops of the holy tape. "I've digitized it," Brent chirped, holding up a thumb drive shaped like a bullet. "At midnight, I'll premiere it with synchronized VR reenactment. Thousands will witness authenticity." Each syllable felt like a hammer tapping my sternum. "People will die." "Maybe," he said, eyes shimmering, "but they'll feel something real. Isn't that why you chased these voices?" My rage spiked, but so did recognition. His hunger mirrored mine. Unfiltered, untreated, lethal. He waved toward a cluttered table where workshop tools surrounded 2 small steel cylinders wired to circuit boards. Pipe bombs, half finished. He caught my glare. "Relax. Placeholders for the stream. Symbolism." I stepped closer, heart jackhammering. Strings of text flashed on his center monitor. An auto-uplink countdown, 11 hours until midnight. "Brent, cancel the release," I said. "Hand over the tape. We'll document responsibly." He laughed, turning sinister. "Responsibility is just another filter. The world needs raw feed. I glanced at the door. No good. He stood between me and the evidence. So I pivoted. At least let me interview you. Your motives deserve context. Brent's vanity twitched. An exclusive? I nodded, sliding my handheld recorder from my pocket. Tell the world why. He motioned to a threadbare couch. I sat, recorder rolling. He launched into a monologue. Bullied childhood, numb parents, video games where kill counts yielded scoreboard validation. He discovered the Columbine diaries at 15 and found blueprints for transcendence. Each sentence grew fevered. Spittle flecked his lips. He expounded on Darwinism, fame metrics, influencer analytics. While he spiraled, I scanned the room. The stolen cassette remained atop the mixer, 5 feet away. My backpack's zipper whispered. My fingers grazed the crowbar's handle. So, I interrupted, the bombs, symbolism only? Mostly, he said, eyes flaring, unless the stream underperforms. He winked. Adrenaline geysered. I rose slowly. Need the bathroom, I lied. He nodded, engrossed in chat stats. In the hallway I found a breaker panel. Flip the mains, plunge the house into darkness, maybe confuse him long enough to snatch the tape. My hand hovered, but footsteps padded behind me. Brent's silhouette loomed, blade of kitchen knife catching monitor glow. Leaving so soon, he hissed. Instinct overrode fear. I slammed the crowbar upward. Metal met wrist, knife clattered. I lunged, grabbed the cassette. Brent screamed, clutching his arm. I shoved him against drywall, bolted toward the door. He recovered fast, snarling, "I'm live, idiot! They're watching!" I burst outside, sunlight blinding after the LED cave. Across the street, the black van's doors flung open. FBI. Agent Klein emerged with 2 tactical officers. Shouts, drawn pistols. Brent stumbled onto the porch, knife reclaimed. "Drop it!" Klein barked. Brent lifted the bullet-shaped thumb drive like a talisman. "Long live the revolution!" Before I could scream, he plunged the knife into his own throat. Blood sprayed an arc across yellow siding. Officers swarmed. Klein pushed me back. Paramedics arrived too late. Brent died smiling, crimson bubbling through his teeth. The thumb drive slipped from his grasp, skittering down steps. I knelt, caught it with gloved fingers. Police cordoned the block. I gave Klein the original cassette and the drive. She bagged them, staring at Brent's lifeless form. "We cut one head," she said. "2 more sprout." My knees shook. "We still slice." Back at HQ, forensics confirmed Brent had scheduled a midnight mass upload mirrored across decentralized servers. With his death, login tokens expired. The script failed. Catastrophe averted, for now. Klein offered me witness protection again. I refused. Instead, we negotiated controlled release, select excerpts contextualized by survivor commentary, hosted on a non-profit archive requiring authenticated research credentials, a firewall against spectacle, albeit porous. That evening I returned home. The crimson X on my wall remained, but I no longer felt targeted, just sobered. I uncapped a Sharpie and, beside Hunt, added a 5th option: reconcile. I left its box unchecked. Some choices take years. I called Maya, recounted everything. She listened, silence heavy with grief and reluctant relief. "You can't disinfect the internet," she said, "but you can vaccinate hearts by telling the full story, not the highlight reel." Midnight passed without explosions. I lay in bed, ghosts whispering softer. Yet distant sirens still bled through the night, reminding me horror is cyclical, echoes awaiting fresh cavities to inhabit. Before sleep, I opened my notebook and wrote a new vow. Finish the narrative, center the wounded, starve the devils. Then a smaller postscript. Forgive myself for ever feeding them. Chapter 6. Viral fault lines. I jolted awake before sunrise, heart jackhammering from a nightmare in which cafeteria tiles liquefied into a sea of camera shutters. In the dream, every flash froze me mid-scream, immortalizing terror as collectible trading cards. I stumbled to the kitchen for water, phone buzzing with alerts like hornets trapped in my fist. The non-profit archive, our carefully gated exhibit meant for credentialed researchers, had been breached. Someone scraped the servers overnight and dumped the raw audio on multiple alt video platforms. View counts already dwarfed our modest academic traffic. Comment sections writhed with memes, kill count fantasies, and a chilling hashtag, Rewrite Columbine. I stared at the screen until text blurred. My stomach churned cold coffee. A voicemail from Maya waited. Her voice, usually composed, quivered. The kids in my support group are panicking. They can't escape the voices. What did we do? Guilt opened like a trapdoor beneath my ribs. I dressed in yesterday's clothes, memory of Brent's blood still etched in my mind, and drove to Maya's clinic. She met me outside, eyes ringed red. Protesters gathered across the parking lot, some bearing candles for victims, others holding signs reading, "Free the Truth." Two groups shouted across a thin rope line, grief and spectacle snarling at each other. Inside, survivors huddled in a corner, phones clutched like grenades. A teenage boy scrolled through leaked footage, tears streaking acne. Maya confiscated devices gently, whispering affirmations. When she turned to me, her disappointment weighed more than a jury's verdict. "This was supposed to inform, not infect," she said. Before I could conjure apology, the clinic TV flickered to a breaking news broadcast. A popular conspiracy podcaster, Rex Barlow, announced an emergency livestream dissecting the newly unearthed Columbine tapes at noon. Barlow's brand blended sensationalism with anti-institution venom, exactly the amplifier the killers would crave. Maya muted the screen. "You need to confront him," she said. "Debunk before the rot hardens." My pulse stuttered. Facing a digital lynch mob felt suicidal, but silence had consequences. I called Agent Klein. She agreed to accompany me. 2 hours later, we stood outside Barlow's downtown studio, a gutted warehouse rebranded into neon-lit dystopia. Fans queued around the block, many wearing shirts emblazoned with the shooters' likenesses remixed into streetwear. Security reluctantly ushered us to a backstage corridor painted black as a gun barrel. Klein flanked me, badge visible. Barlow greeted us with reptilian charm, slicked hair, mirrored aviators despite indoor gloom. "Welcome to the People's Court," he purred, guiding us onto a set splashed in red LEDs. A live audience hooted. Camera drones buzzed overhead like metallic insects. The show opened with a montage of leaked audio juxtaposed against sensational graphics, explosions, tally marks, devil horns. My stomach lurched. When the spotlight hit, Barlow turned to me, grin razor thin. "Tell us, archivist, why hide the truth from honest Americans?" I leaned toward the mic, palms sweating. "Context isn't censorship. These tapes were never blueprints. They're warning sirens. Without guidance, they recruit." Boos erupted. Barlow raised a hand for hush. "Or maybe you're gatekeeping tragedy for profit." He flashed a prop check labeled grant money. I countered, voice cracking. "Profit? The cost is human lives. The shooters knew media would spread their gospel. You're proving them right." The crowd roared. Some applauded, others jeered. Klein cited domestic terror stats, algorithms amplifying extremist content. Barlow smirked, pivoting to a commercial. As cameras cut, he leaned close, whispered, "Controversy spikes CPMs. Thanks for the bump." During the break, a man in a trench coat slipped through security, hurling a jar of red paint. It burst across my chest, sticky and metallic, smelling faintly of pennies. He shouted, "Blood on your hands," before guards tackled him. The crowd chanted the hashtag like a war drum. Backstage, Klein wiped paint from my jacket. Barlow's segment already trending. She showed me her phone, clips looping across social networks, my pleas truncated into sound bites framed as cowardice. I felt hollowed. Every move feeds them. Klein's jaw clenched. Then changed the menu. We retreated to a federal cyber forensics lab, a sterile room glowing azure with server racks. Technicians hunted the leak's origin. IP clusters pointed to an overseas troll farm specializing in disinformation. We initiated takedown requests, but new mirrors multiplied faster than whack-a-mole. Exhaustion blurred hours. At 2 a.m., a tech flagged a chilling thread. Users planning a tribute event at a Colorado mall on the massacre's anniversary, 3 days away. Blueprints posted, participant count climbing. Klein mobilized local field offices, but resources stretched thin. My fault, my fault, my fault chanted inside my skull. I left the lab before dawn, driving aimlessly until foothills swallowed city lights. I parked at the Columbine Memorial Garden, sun rising over granite slabs. Dew glistened on engraved names like fresh tears. I knelt before Rachel Scott's plaque. First victim. Wind rustled trees planted for each student. I spoke aloud, voice shaking. I let them borrow your deaths for ratings. I'm sorry. Footsteps approached. An older couple, eyes puffy yet kind. Rachel's parents. I expected fury, but her mother offered a tissue, whispered, "We fight the darkness together, or not at all." We sat on a bench as birdsong tangled with distant highway hum. They recounted Rachel's dream of becoming a writer, how she left journals filled with compassion. Eric and Dylan wrote manifestos, her father said. Rachel wrote reasons to love. A realization cleaved me. I'd obsessed over predator journals, neglecting countertexts of the fallen. The killer's words survived because they were copied, the victims because they were cherished. Fame craves replication, but legacy chooses its curators. I promised to amplify Rachel's writings alongside Diaries of Darkness, letting light contest spectacle. They squeezed my hand. First sense of absolution since this odyssey began. That night, Maya and I convened a digital town hall. Survivors, educators, mental health experts, live-streamed on the same platforms hosting the leak. We titled it, Voices Left Behind. We played excerpts of victims' essays, poetry, voicemail goodbyes, voices that rarely receive virality. Viewership started modest, then swelled as Brent's former followers tuned in, curious. Comments turned from skull emojis to prayer hands, broken heart icons. Trolls mocked, but dialogue blossomed, some admitting the raw tapes had felt wrong without context. Algorithm charts showed a subtle shift. For every repost of the killer's audio, 2 viewers now clicked our memorial stream. A ratio far from victory, yet first evidence that narrative gravity could bend. At 3 a.m., after hours moderating chat, I slumped onto my couch. A package awaited at my doorstep. No return label. Inside, a VHS tape cracked in half, magnetic guts spilling like black ribbon. A note taped to it. Not done yet. Anniversary date and time scrawled beneath. My hands trembled, but anger cooled to icy resolve. I pinned the note to my wall beside Hunt and Reconcile, drawing a new box labeled Protect. I checked it with unwavering strokes. Sleep finally crept in, bringing no dreams, only the steady drum of upcoming chapters waiting to be written. Chapters that must outshine the darkness, even if they bleed along the edges. Chapter 7. Anniversary Vigil. 2 dawns remained before April 20th. The calendar box glowed like a radioactive tombstone on my phone screen. Threads planning the tribute event multiplied, spawning regional spin-offs, flash mob shooters chasing the illusion of infamy. Each post warped the massacre from history into template. Agent Klein commandeered a vacant conference room inside the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, converting it into a crisis nerve center. whiteboards webbed with usernames, IP hops, mall floor plans. She paged me in at 06 and Geo. Coffee tasted like battery acid after 2 hours of sleep. Credible intel points to Brookridge Center, she said, circling a point on a satellite printout of a suburban megaplex 20 miles south of Columbine. They picked it for symbolism. Open atrium like a high school commons, skylights for dramatic drone footage. Her disgust etched the word drone like a scar. The plan, pieced together from intercepted DMs, called for 4 shooters in trench coats, GoPros streaming to a dark web CDN Brent once helped configure. They dubbed themselves the Rewrite Quartet. Klein assigned me a grim role, decoy archivist. My presence on site, publicly advertised through a hacked social media announcement, would lure the quartet into premature action before their logistics matured. I balked. Human bait? You volunteered when you published, she said flatly. Use the spotlight you created to blind them. Maya objected, joining via video. We risk turning the mall into a stage. Klein countered that the mall was already a stage. At least this way, the crew, snipers, and bomb squad technicians would control the curtain. I signed the liability waiver with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. Klein fitted me with a Kevlar vest disguised as a denim jacket and wired an earpiece linked to her tactical channel. She handed me a slim body cam. If things go sideways, your footage becomes evidence, and ironically, education. That afternoon, we leaked a tweet. Exclusive. Archivist releases unseen Columbine materials at Brookridge Center 4:19 2 p.m. Retweets detonated. Hashtags jar rewrite Columbine and archivist leak trended. I felt bile rise watching likes climb, digital applause for a tragedy encore. Night before deployment, Maya and I met at the Memorial Garden. Wind toyed with votive candles, making their flames bow like mourners. She pressed a small leather notebook into my hands. Rachel Scott's final journal. If you're going to carry scriptures, she said, carry hers too. I opened to a random page. I won't be labeled as average. The median between the killers and the victims stared up at me, a fork in every heart. I promised to keep the book close. April 19th, 12:45 p.m. Brookridge's glass doors yawned. Sunday shoppers milled, unaware of nets overhead. Plainclothes officers disguised as mall walkers. Janitors with concealed radios, a K-9 unit sniffing trash cans. I entered Food Court Central, sat at a high-top table, backpack visible. Inside, only Rachel's journal and a blank hard drive, but no one on the boards knew that. Earpiece crackled. Klein's voice, blue team in position, crowd density 40%. I pretended to type notes while scanning reflections in storefront windows. At 2:07, a hush rippled, subtle but real, shopper's instincts sensing barometric pressure of menace. 4 figures emerged from a sporting goods store, trench coats too heavy for spring. They split pairs, flanking the mezzanine. Klein, eyes on quartet, wait for clear view of hands. My pulse hammered war drum rhythms. The leader, the tallest skull buzz cut, locked eyes with me. He tapped his chest twice, a signal I recognized from Brent's chat dumps meaning ready to stream. My mouth dried. I stood, raising my phone overhead as if live blogging. In truth, I texted a single emoji, umbrella, to Klein, code for imminent rain of bullets. Buzzcut reached beneath his coat. Time fractured. I glimpsed black polymer. Rifle? But he withdrew only a camcorder, raising it with theatrical flourish. Crowd gasped, half expecting gunfire, half uncertain. He shouted, voice amplified by the food court acoustics, "Archivist, hand over the tapes and history will spare these sheep." Off script. They'd decided spectacle before slaughter, forcing negotiation to maximize streaming suspense. I lifted Rachel's journal high so Buzzcut's camera could see. "These are the only pages that matter," I yelled. He sneered, advancing. His partners mirrored, hands inside coats. Klein barked in my ear. Hold. No confirmed weapons. I opened the journal, reading aloud. I have this theory. If one person can go out of their way to show compassion, it will start a chain reaction. My voice cracked but carried. Buzzcut froze, confusion flickering. The crowd stilled, drawn to the incongruity. Behind him, one partner's fingers trembled on an unseen trigger. I kept reading Rachel's words about empathy, courage, faith. Each sentence felt like laying bricks across a chasm. The crowd's breathing synchronized. A child near the carousel began to cry, not from fear, but resonance. Buzzcut's mask fractured. He lowered the camcorder an inch. In that sliver of hesitation, a flash bang exploded behind him. SWAT's breach distraction. White light swallowed sound. I dove as thunder cracked. Chaos, shoppers screaming, SWAT pouring in, quartet fumbling for true weapons now. Earpiece filled with commands. Suspects armed, shots fired. Gunfire retorted, sharp, staccato. I crawled behind an overturned table, journal clutched. Ceramic tiles exploded inches from my knee. Klein shouted coordinates, officers returning fire with precision. Seconds felt geologic. When silence finally settled, I risked peeking. 2 shooters lay prone, rifles skittered away. A third bled from a leg wound, surrendering. Buzzcut crouched behind a kiosk, weapon leveled at a trembling teenage girl. Snipers shouted to drop it. He met my gaze across the court, eyes wet, not with regret but vindication. I saw the calculus, dying on camera secures myth. He pressed the rifle muzzle under his chin and pulled. Time resumed. Medics swarmed. Klein hauled me upright, checking for wounds. None. Scrapes only. Journal saved? She asked. I nodded. Tears streaking dust on my face. 3 casualties among shoppers. Non-fatal. 0 dead beyond the quartet's leader. A miracle measured against the massacre we feared. Yet even one child's shriek still echoed inside me. Media vans encircled the mall within minutes. We were shuffled through service corridors. Klein confiscated my body cam, promising careful edit. I surrendered it willingly. Outside, twilight bled pink and violet. Maya arrived, throwing arms around me. I sobbed, journal pinched between us. Did Rachel's words reach them? I asked. They reached you, she answered. That's a start. News headlines spun. Mall shooting foiled. Archivist quotes victim's journal. Social feeds flooded with Tachyon chain reaction challenge. Users posting acts of kindness in Rachel's name. For every troll proclaiming hoax, 2 strangers donated blood. Back at my apartment, Crimson X remained, but it felt less like a threat, more like a wound scabbing. I updated the tally wall. Under Protect's checked box, I added another line, redeem, and left it empty, a goal not yet earned. 1 chapter left, the anniversary dawn imminent. I powered up my laptop to draft the finale, determined that the story, like Rachel's chain reaction, would end in a call stronger than the shots that began it. Chapter 8. Chains unbroken, chains reforged. April 20th. Sky over Littleton, a brittle cobalt, as if the atmosphere itself held its breath. 26 years since gunfire shattered spring, yet every siren heard today felt suspiciously nostalgic, each bird call a possible echo of distant screams. Trauma, I'd learned, is an hourglass. Flip it, and the grains begin again. At dawn, survivors, families, journalists, and silent pilgrims filed toward Clement Park for the annual remembrance. I arrived flanked by Agent Klein and Maya, security by law and security by grace. My backpack contained only Rachel's journal, a single rose, and a flash drive holding curated excerpts, victim essays, counselor notes, Rachel's doodles of hope, Dylan's apologetic line buried beneath bravado, balanced presentation pledged to the public that afternoon. The amphitheater lawn shimmered with candlebag lanterns awaiting dusk. I watched parents steady trembling votives, children old enough to know the ritual but too young to grasp why it repeats. Klein posted officers discreetly, sharpshooters nested in distant trees, invisible watchers because memory had teeth. 10:13 a.m. Time the first shot rang in 1999. Bells tolled 13 times, one for each life lost that morning. On stroke 9, a drone buzzed overhead. Media or menace. SWAT tracked it, ready. It hovered, filmed, departed. Crowd exhaled. At noon, I took the podium set beneath a banner, remember, reflect, rebuild. My knees trembled, but Rachel's notebook warmed my palm. I spoke into a hush. We have heard the killer's voices enough to choke our feeds, but today we amplify the voices they tried to silence. I read one passage from each victim, jokes about prom dresses, diary musings on physics homework, a haiku about spring rain. Ordinary, luminous. With every syllable, the amphitheater brightened. Not physically, but in collective posture. People leaned forward to receive life rather than catalog death. When I finished, applause mingled with sobs. I handed the flash drive to Dan, president of the Columbine Memorial Foundation. For your archives, I said. Curated context, stripped of propaganda. He nodded, tears glassing his eyes. Klein whispered that online chatter indicated potential disruptions thwarted by visible security. The quartet's livestream forum fractured into blame wars. Some members denounced violence after hearing Rachel's words. Even algorithms, it seemed, could be starved of gore. Afternoon sun slanted. Ceremony concluded. Families dispersed to picnic blankets, releasing balloons that carried handwritten hopes skyward. Maya found me near the reflecting pool. "How heavy is your backpack?" she asked. "Heavier inside than out," I admitted. "Then lighten it." She pointed to a burn barrel set aside for symbolic releases. Notes, regrets, relics. Beside it waited survivors clutching scraps of paper, ready to surrender anchors. I approached the barrel, heart pounding. From the pack I withdrew the last physical cassette. The copy agent Klein had let me keep for personal reckoning. The Unzipped Archive. I turned it over in my hands, felt ridge lines of molded plastic, imagined magnetic dark matter swirling within. A boy in a Columbine soccer shirt stepped forward, maybe 17, the age forever denied some victims. He held a printed screenshot of the leaked tape's comment thread, trolls laughing. "I'm done giving them clicks," he said, tossing the sheet into the flames. Paper curled, ink blistered. My own hands shook as I lowered the cassette. Plastic sizzled, released acrid smoke that made survivors back away coughing, but none objected. Flames chewed through magnetic ribbon. The hiss sounded like a tape rewinding to silence. Ash floated upward, shards of oxide dancing like diseased snow. For a terrifying second, I feared I'd regret incineration, wanted proof, receipts, history. But as smoke thinned, I felt lighter, as if each charred fleck removed a thumbnail of weight from my spine. Evening descended. Lanterns ignited across the lawn, constellations on Earth mirroring constellations above. Quiet agreement between the living and the lost. People formed circles, reciting names. When Rachel's came, I added softly, "and her words," raising the notebook. In that hush, wind riffled pages, landing on her final entry. "I won't apologize for living out loud." Maya smiled through tears. "She's still writing." Klein approached with good news. The tribute threads showed mass exodus, foiled mall attack and public empathy pivot, spooked many. Arrests followed sting operations, servers seized. "Chain reaction," she said, gesturing to lanterns. As lantern light silvered faces, I saw integration. The shooter diaries, still studied in criminology courses, yes. but balanced now by diaries of love. I glimpsed a future where true crime podcasts opened with disclaimers acknowledging victim narratives, where algorithms flagged killer idolatry as self-harm content. Not utopia, but tilt. Night deepened. I walked the memorial path one last time, tally wall resurfacing in my mind. Archive checked, expose checked, incinerate checked in part, hunt checked, protect checked, redeem unchecked. I paused before Rachel's tree, pen in pocket. On the notebook's inside cover I wrote, "Redemption is not a finish line. It's every step taken away from the precipice." I checked redeem, not an end point but commitment. Maya, watching, asked, "What now?" "Pass the notebook on," I said. "Let the next archivist carry light." We stood in silence as lanterns floated on the reflecting pool, each flame a fragile defiance. A choir of frogs began croaking, a mundane, beautiful noise. No gunshots, no sirens. For the first time since breaking that warehouse lock, I heard nothing in the wind except the promise of ordinary tomorrow. If you or someone you know hears darkness louder than hope, please reach out. In the US, dial 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 24/7. Outside the US, find international resources at www.opencounseling.com suicide hotlines. Let's continue Rachel's chain of compassion. One voice, one act, one rewrite of history at a time.